Hey, Dr. Randy, good week to you today.
Hey, good morning, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's our weekly podcast today, and our topic is an interesting one, and it's called What Long-Term Relationship Partners Should Not Expect from Each Other. Long-term relationships. So I
Yeah,
guess you would think about like marriages here, right? These are long-term relationships.
kind of should be sort of obvious to people, but it often is not. When people get in a new relationship, man, it is a bubble. It is a bubble. They put all their energy, their love, their time, their focus, everything into that new relationship. They just blot out everything else that's going on in their lives. And they set each other up kind of for failure later on when the blush of a brand new relationship starts to fade a little bit. And yet the expectations that are created during that relationship continue, and people become disillusioned and disappointed and angry and upset. And then relationships end up falling apart because the people in that bubble, and I don't want to ever suggest not loving that bubble, but the people in the bubble are not aware that they're sort of implying that these feelings and these commitments and this amount of energy will always exist, even as the bubble bursts and people have to then bring the relationship into their world and can't possibly do that. They somehow make those promises, and then, as I said, people become disappointed, and then relationships will end for the wrong reasons because they didn't plan that to begin with. They didn't step back and say, wow, we can enjoy the bubble, but obviously it won't always be this way. So let's make sure that we plan for what will happen afterwards. Even though we're bubbled in, we can still be aware enough to understand and not promise that this will be forever. So I want to come up with just some of the things that people promise that end up becoming disillusionments or disappointments. Just sort of go over a few of them. Most will be very familiar, but I think people need to be reminded from time to time to do things differently. So the first one is that we're going to forever be entitled to each other's quote unquote lives. And what that means is that you will take me into consideration with every decision you make.
Mhm.
Whatever you do, wherever you want to go, do you want to go on trips or things that you want to be with you? I will always come first. We will plan that together. We will always combine our resources and make sure that we own one another in kind of some way, which I'll explain a little bit later. But every decision should be run through us before it is ever made, before anybody ever does anything. And if it's not okay, it doesn't get made, it doesn't get done. So they say, well, we are now blended, so therefore our whole lives are blended, and everything we say and do is going to come from that blend. However, they're in a bubble, so they're not blended. They're not blended at all. And so when they move into the outside world, that expectation that everything will be run through us first absolutely dissolves, because it cannot be. It cannot be. You go back to work and your boss decides you're going to work all weekend. You don't have any choice to ask the person you're with, is that okay? Can we make that decision? Will we be okay if we have to give up our date night, or whatever happens? I mean, life intervenes. And so they know that relationship, that usness, that bubble can no longer be the ultimate filter of every decision they're going to make. So that would be kind of the first one. The second one is that we should always be ready to succumb to the needs of the other person. In an early relationship, whatever you want, my lady, whatever you want, I'm there for you, like Princess Bride. Just fall over backwards. Just think about something that will appear for you, because the most they can make that other person joyful and happy, the happier they are. And so, what you have a wish, I had a wish, doesn't matter. Whatever your wish is, I will put mine aside joyfully, happily, and I will take care of you and make you happy. Well, that doesn't work, obviously, over time, because life intervenes, as I said. But then when it begins, that expectation or that promise or that desire can become sort of like an entitlement. Like, why aren't you doing that for me? Why don't you succumb to my request? Why am I not as important as I was before? Because you were important within a bubble. I have to now mix in the rest of my life. And sometimes I'm going to, oh, God forbid, want to do what I want to do, even if it makes you unhappy. I want to make my priorities ahead of yours. This is more important to me. What? I thought I always came first, but no, of course, Now, when that happens, sadly, very sadly, sometimes people will start to resort to ways of coercing that person back into that wonderful sort of power they had over them. They'll start to get angry, or they'll ghost the person, or they'll threaten them in little ways. You better take care of me, or I might not always be here. Those kind of little tiny coercions and threats, or ghosting them, as I said, or gaslighting them, trying to sort of get back the power they once had, that their needs and desires always came first. And those behaviors will often push the person farther away and make them less likely to succumb. So it's a really good idea to know that in the bubble of new love, that succumbing is normal and natural for both people, but it shouldn't be part of any healthy relationship, ever. You don't automatically succumb. You have to nurture each other, but other things are important too. People have to make room for everything that's important to the other person, and then negotiate, compromise, all those wonderful things that make great relationships great. Okay, let's take the third one. Very often when a person starts a new relationship, they are hurting from one that didn't work. And so they sort of open themselves up to be quote unquote rescued. Now, rescuers, look like they don't need anything. They just want to be there for you, take care of you, help you heal, make you feel better. Sadly, that's often the nice guy or the girl next door that person ultimately leaves for somebody who's a little bit sexier and more powerful. Rescuers sometimes don't hold on to their people over long periods of time. However, rescuers do have needs, and those needs do emerge later on. Sometimes rescuers can become persecutors if their victims stay victims. They want them to get better. Or sometimes they want them to stay victims so they'll have a role to continue playing with them. But if something starts out in a rescuing situation and that doesn't heal itself and go past that, and there aren't other reasons for people to be together, that relationship is just going to fail. It's going to disappear. Rescuing is fine when a legitimate crisis happens in a relationship, but not as a way of life. It can't always be, I'm the victim, you're my rescuer. Okay. The fourth one, we'll never keep score. When we live together after we're together in love, we will never keep score. We'll never try to control the other person by what they owe us. Never, 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 never. Well, that disappears. As love grows, availability is not always an option. Many partners resort to scorekeeping to try to make sure that things are going to stay fair. But remember, when they were in their bubble, they promised never to keep score, ever, ever, ever. And now all of a sudden they find themselves saying, but wait a minute, I gave you all this stuff. Well, I didn't ask for it. I thought I had money in the bank. It's got a hole in the bottom. Oh, hold on a minute. We need to renegotiate this to get more fairness on our relationship. But let's not resort to scorekeeping to do that. You owe me. Scorekeeping usually ends up like 11,003 to 11,004 and never goes anywhere. It just doesn't. So if you see a relationship resorting to scorekeeping, you didn't recognize that from the beginning. And of course, things have to be fair. Of course, you have to negotiate. Of course, people relationships are transactional. They are not, chivalrous, marvelous experiences where people always will take care of you. People need to be appreciated, reciprocated. They need to know that their needs are also going to be met. So scorekeeping is really, really bad. And if it starts to happen, that you're not looking at the transactional process. It's normal in every relationship. Okay, let's do another one. We will love each other unconditionally forever.
Hey, that's what's on the wedding vows, right?
Without conditions, forever and ever and ever. Those promises do happen at the beginning, where giving is automatic and appreciation, coffers are full. Of course you say this is going to be forever, 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 but no mortal love is unconditional. It doesn't exist. You can have, as I said a few minutes ago, you can be chivalrous in moments where the giving is in itself enough. When you have a sick baby, something happens, a person needs you, but you always are going to want something. Maybe if people have a deep faith in a God, they'll think that maybe that love is unconditional. But human beings are human beings. We are immortal. We want what we want back. And so the importance of saying to somebody, what are our conditions? How can we meet them? What can we give up? What can we do easily for the other person? What can you count on, and what are you going to have to bargain with me for? That's reality. That's mortal. Unconditional love is not mortal. It just doesn't happen. Sometimes people think that people in early relationships call each other baby. Maybe unconditional love is meant for a baby. Maybe you feel like a baby, you're supposed to be unconditionally loved. You can do anything you want, the other person will never stop loving you. But in the real world, among adults, that simply is not true. People do love conditionally, and they're supposed to. They just need to be honest about it, authentic about it, sharing what they need, what they can give, what they can't give, under what circumstances. And then you say, can I afford this relationship as an investment? Will I get back what I put into it? Or is it going to cost me, no matter how beautiful it might be, more than I can afford? It's just facing reality. We are not that altruistic as humans. Okay, let's look at another one. We'll always be number one for each other. No matter what happens, you will be tops on my priority list. You just have to let me know what you need, and I'll be there. This blends into some of the others, but it's a little bit different. Sometimes somebody else, as I said, they need to be the priority. Maybe the priorities clash. Both people need to be the priorities at the same time. But if you don't have freedom within commitment, if you can't state who you are, what you want, which is important to you, and your partner says, listen, we need to make room for who you are, even if I have a priority, we need to make sure yours is okay. It's a kind of ever-growing, ever-transforming negotiation process between people who want what they want, but also want their partners to be happy, and know very well that sometimes they just cannot happen at the same time. As relationship matures, the energy each person needs for other obligations and interactions, you have to take it into consideration. It has to be redistributed. There has to be fairness. Now, of course, if one person gets sick, if a job is lost, there are times when people have to really dig from their, what I would call their sort of chivalrous coffer, and give without needing anything in return. And quality relationships do that. And some of them get, by the way, hit with a lot of those. And sometimes they survive anyway and they get stronger, but sometimes they fall apart. The relationship just doesn't have the resources to meet those unexpected crises. And that's understandable. Let's do a couple more. We will always be completely and totally compatible. Everything you want, I will want. Everything I want, you will want. Well, first of all, that will tend to create a very boring relationship if people are compatible in every single experience, because differences produce spark, they produce excitement, they produce the ability to challenge and work through things. I've also known people who are totally compatible who don't even like each other. And I've known people who have been incompatible and madly in love. So compatibility just mean the security of being able to predict when a person will be there, won't be there. So it's nice to have certain basic compatibilities are really important, like the same moral and ethical values, or the way you maybe spend money or put money away, or things like that, or how you want to raise your children, or whether you even want to have children. I mean, there are certain compatibilities that are core and they're necessary. There are certain cultures where, people are very, take care of their elderly. And in other cultures, they don't matter. As people get older, they can be thrown away. Well, that would be an incompatibility that might not work at all, because something is very important to one person and it's not important to another person at all. But, we really need to be able to work on what compatibilities are central and core to our relationship, that we need to meet each other in the same space and time, and other things that are just not compatible, but maybe they're not that important. Maybe they're just not important. We can kind of let them go. You got to be able to negotiate rather than being disappointed, and you got to be fair. But again, if you have what I would call a deal breaker, somebody says I want children, somebody says I don't, and it's incredibly important to the person who wants children, that relationship isn't going to work, even if it's compatible in 99% of everything else. So you sort of have to rate what people want and where they need to be compatible, and where it's really, as I said earlier, just let it go. It's never going to be the same. You're never going to like my high school sweetheart. even though we have no relationship, you don't want me to ever have anything to do with him again. That's a deal breaker for me. But sometimes it's like, well, I don't mind. That was an old relationship. You're over it. You're good friends with him and his wife now. I need to incorporate them into my life. I don't need to make this an incompatibility. Okay, we'll do one more. We're going to always completely embrace what is important to the other partner. That is an absolute impossibility. Outside influences may not work out. They take energy away from the relationship and require new choices and new sacrifices. Stuff starts to emerge, past relationships, family expectations. You have parents who want you to have dinner with them every Sunday night, and you're married to someone who doesn't like family. I mean, we can't always embrace. See, this ties into what I talked about before, but it adds a little more color to it. Maybe there'll be financial restrictions that, somebody, as I said, wants to take a vacation for a month every year, and somebody else wants to save for a house or something like that. So though this blends into what I was talking about before, it's a little different because you have to rethink your priorities. You have to rethink your priorities. What I've always adhered to and felt I could never change, but I really love this person, and that's not important to that person. So how can I put that aside, challenge my own brain lock-ins, look at things from a different perspective, wonder how I can feed this relationship in a different way by embracing what's important to the other partner, but not feeling obligated to do that, by denying the things that are important to me and the things I love, and then having an underlying resentment. So wrapping all that up, it's like, it's important to love and cherish the bubble, but always know there's going to be more when you open it up to the real world, and try to incorporate those processes while you're in love.
Mm-hmm.
You can't rock the boat very well in a bubble. It's not going to fall, or not going to fall down. Nothing's going to fall down. So if you can challenge each other with some of these issues while you're in the bubble, you're much more likely to have a long-term relationship work. How does that?
Well, I mean, it's really getting into marriage, right? I mean, these are all like, I mean, aside from boyfriend girlfriend, these are all like relevant
About long-term
success.
relationships. Well, making sure that long-term relationships don't fall apart because promises were made that weren't appropriate.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I mean, you also get a lot of clients that are obviously into marriage counseling, correct?
Yes.
And so these are some of the things that you've seen through your experience. Where can they reach you if they need more information?
Well, I have written 265 articles for Psychology Today online, and they are all on one site called relationshipsactually.org, sorted by subject. Please feel free to peruse. You can also get a hold of me anytime on Randy Gunther at Cox.net, or Randy Gunther, all one word, lowercase, Randy with an I. I'm also pretty much all over Google. So if you'd like to Google me or hear more of these podcasts, they are available. Just put my name in and they'll come up.
All right, great, Dr. Randy, and we'll see you again next week.
Sounds lovely. Bye, Randy.